The date is June 25, 2012. My name is Paul Robards, Library Director at Robertson Memorial Library at Middle Georgia College. I was speaking today with Arthur Howard from Warner Robins, Georgia, about his experiences in the Vietnam War. Mr. Howard, what branch of the service did you serve in?
Air Force.
Why did you join the military?
I wanted to fly, and
How?
my uncle, one of my uncles, was at that point was still serving the Air Force, and I just wanted to fly.
How old were you when you joined the military?
I joined ROTC when I was 19 and graduated, and then I got a commission. So I entered in 1967, so I was 21.
What was your hometown when you joined?
Orville, California.
Where did you go to receive basic training?
I went to Biloxi, Mississippi. That would have been Keesler.
Where did you attend advanced training?
Navigator training at Mather Air Force Base in Sacramento, California.
What were you trained to do?
Was a Air Force navigator, undergraduate navigator training.
What weapons did you learn to use, and did you ever have to use them?
We were taught handguns. At that point, it was a 38 and also M16s. I never had to use one.
Were there any particular or special incidents that occurred during your training, and how did it affect your life?
Yes, I met my wife, and we got married when I got back from survival school, and we're still married. So that was 44 years ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. We have 2 children. In terms of the training itself, well, it led to a 30-year career. It led to a new direction. And so it had a profound impact on me. In addition, I met my wife, which is one of the, that really changed my life.
Did you volunteer to go to Vietnam?
Yes. Well, we had in navigator school. Then you got your choice based on your class standing. And I remember we went into a large auditorium room, and they had all the assignments on the chalkboard. And we just went down the road, and all we knew is that this one particular assignment was in PACAF for Pacific Air Command, and it was in a 130, and we had scoped out, and I thought a 130 would be a good navigator airplane, and so that's why I picked that.
How do you think your experiences in Vietnam affected your family?
My wife and I, we got married, finished navigator school, went to survivals, and then we got married. And then she and I went on our honeymoon. It was Lockbourne Air Force Base in Ohio, which was no longer, it's closed. And that's where I went through 130 qualifications. And then I went over to Okinawa in August of '68, and she followed in November. And so for the first 2.5 years of our marriage, we were together and away from home. And we've talked about that a lot. It was a time in our marriage where we really got to know each other. And we were away from our families, and we got to know each other. And it was a way to, it was either get to know each other, and it turned out that, it was a good time. The difference we had there, Paul, was that we would be home, go down for 15 days, down in either into Vietnam, South Vietnam, or in Thailand, and then come back. So it was like being a long-distance truck driver. And so you, unlike people who had to spend a year in Vietnam, I spent half my time was gone, and the other half was with Paula. And so in a way it strengthened our relationship, I think. But it was very different than other people because it wasn't long. There wasn't a long time. There wasn't a long period of separation.
What dates did you serve in Southeast Asia?
September of '68. Last time was in January of '71.
What are the names of the units you were assigned to?
All the time I was assigned to the 35th Tactical Airlift Squadron, which is part of the 346th Airlift Wing. At Naha Air Force Base, Okinawa.
What was your rank during the war?
First, second, first, and lieutenants, and then captain.
What was your first encounter with the enemy?
The flying time over there was split in two parts. When we would go into South Vietnam, we'd fly either, if the first part was out of Cam Ranh Bay, which is about in the middle of Biden and Trang, and then we also flew out of Tan Son Nhut, which is Saigon. And during that phase, we would fly and carry whatever needed to be carried, from ammunition to beer to people. Once or twice you had to carry bodies. And we never had any direct contact with the enemy. Once or twice at the base, the base was mortared. So there was no direct contact. Another mission that this unit flew, we flew a night, actually forward air control in Laos. And we had forward air control. We also had flares. And at that point, we'd fly in either to look for trucks, or if forces were in contact at night, we would fly over them and drop flares and keep them lit while they were under attack. And in that phase, we were shot at by anti-aircraft, predominantly 23 millimeter, 37 millimeter, 57 millimeter.
No SAMs?
No, we had, thank goodness, we had electronic gear on board that would tell us if we were illuminated by radar. We never were. After the year of late 71 and 72, in that same area is when the North Vietnamese did bring in SAMs, and also, I believe, fire-controlled anti-aircraft guns. So for us, we always flew at night. We flew about 7,000 feet above the ground level, and they were using acoustical sights, and they always were, thank goodness, always a little long, yeah. And the other thing is that they would know that when we were around that we were going to call in fighters, and predominantly they'd wait till the fighters came in, and they'd pester them more. But yeah, so that was a time when I came into direct contact with them.
What medals or awards did you receive for your service in Vietnam?
I received a Distinguished Flying Cross and the Air Medal of 7 Oak Leaf Clusters.
From your experience, how would you evaluate the enemy's fighting ability?
From my experience, it was very good. They were tenacious. And now I'm talking about in Laos, and it was called the blind bat, that profile, because we were trying to stop trucks, and the bombs basically were at this point, it was really World War II vintage. We're just starting to get laser guided bombs. And then the Spectre gunships were just coming online, and when they replaced what we were doing, and once they got going, it was a different story. But when we were there, it was really Rube Goldberg almost, except for the flares for the troops in contact. That was a different story. But trying to trying to direct a fighter to drop an iron bomb at a point.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What is your evaluation of American military leadership in Vietnam and of your immediate commanders in the field?
My immediate, when I say immediate commanders, would have been a squadron commander. They were very good. Overall, from my point of view and the way we were being used, I think in looking back, this is hindsight, but I think strategically we made a lot of mistakes.
As a young serviceman, did you understand the politics and diplomacy of both the United States and Southeast Asia that landed you in the middle of a war?
No. And I tried to keep informed, and I brought along, for example, one book I bought was Bernard Fall's Hell in a Very Small Place, and I was interested. But I just, and there was no discussion. It was very routine. Well, now this is, we were stationed in Okinawa, we'd fly in there, and I think we were very much in a bubble. But there was no discussion about the war in terms of purpose or the futility or it was just, we were just doing a job and,
Did your fellow servicemen have the same opinions and understanding that you held?
I would say in terms of flyers, yes. Yeah. I mean, spent a lot of time complaining and griping and all that. But I think it was for us. Now, this would have been different than the Air Force people who flew fighters. But for us, it was just routine. It was what we were trained to do. And we were also over there in a period, we were after Tet and before late 71. It was relatively, from our perspective, it was relatively quiet. And flying in South Vietnam, there was no threat. It was after Khe Sanh, and it was before mid-71 when I left. In mid-71 then, I've talked to people who flew there in 130s then, and it was just, oh boy, it wasn't routine then. And they had a lot of ground threats. But the period of time I was there, it was relatively benign. From our point of view, I didn't I'm talking about my experience.
Right. Did your understanding of the situation affect how you did your job?
It was really important, and from my perspective, it was important what the people I worked with, what they thought of me. So I wanted to do a good job and be thought of as competent. And it was particularly important for me to be well thought of by senior NCOs. And I remember they paired me up with a flight engineer, a master sergeant. And he sort of took me under his wing for the first 6 months just to sort of make sure I was, that I understood the ropes and how things worked, and make sure I didn't make any serious mistakes.
Make sure you were squared away.
Yeah.
Describe your living conditions, housing, and food in Vietnam.
We were always on air bases. It would vary, trailers, 2 or 3 people to a room, air conditioned. That was also true in Thailand when we were there. It was 6 people. It was about the size of this room we're in now, divided into bunks, and we shared our bed. So it was sort of like camping, but it was always air conditioned because we'd fly all times of day or night, and so when you'd come in the middle of the day, and because you had to, you got crew rest, so you had air conditioning, which
got R&R.
Yeah, and then the food was chow hall and
beats the sea ration, from what I understand.
Yeah.
What did you do?
Powdered eggs were, I have an acquired taste, but yeah.
What did you do to relax and have fun?
Well, for example, in Cameron Bay, you had the air base, and you could just walk to the beach, and it was a fantastic beach. You could go there. You could also, there was an inlet where you could rent a boat and go water skiing, and those kind of things. Sit around, spend a lot of time, at the club, and talking, playing. It was just a routine you fell into because you knew you were only there 15 days, and when we flew out of Ubon in Thailand, I remember several times we'd go downtown, and one time befriended the intelligence officer, and so we took a trip down the river and went to several villages, and so that was pretty exotic. The most interesting was in Ubon. I was sitting there, and a fellow I knew in the ROTC unit showed up, and he was a Japanese American. It wasn't really quite clear what he was doing, but he was in civilian clothes. And he could speak Thai, so he went. It was like. So he was traveling. He said he was traveling in Thailand. I'm not quite sure what he was doing, but it was just.
Sounds like a don't ask situation.
Yeah. It was like we had a couple of beers and talked about girls back at college.
When your assignment in Southeast Asia was finished, how did you feel?
Our unit was a little different in that our unit was being deactivated. And so everybody was leaving, and which would be different if one or two people. So it was just like everybody, and we got all. I went from my next assignment was in North Carolina at Pope Air Force Base, and so there was a lot of excitement about where are you going, and we were consumed with buying cars, and the Datsun 240Z was new, and so.
Yep.
We brought those back. I mean, it was just sort of was all this, and we hadn't, in January, we stopped, we stood down. So for about a month, we were just, getting ready to go back and, all that. So it was pretty much caught up. So there wasn't any sadness about being finished. It was what's coming next.
How did you feel once you arrived back in the United States?
There wasn't any. I was happy, I went back to family and reunited with them, but it was interesting. It wasn't any. It was like, oh, you've been gone. Good to see you back. There was no comment either way. It was a lot, and it was no. It wasn't negative. It wasn't. My dad was particularly worried. He was particularly worried. So in a sense, for him, me being back, but he didn't express it while I was gone. So he was worried. My mom was worried, but he was particularly worried while I was gone.
What is your view of the war and your part in it today?
I can see that. I can see that in the strategic picture that it was part of the. I think it was part of the drama, part of the maneuvering of the Cold War and the Soviets. I just you're looking back and saying, "Doggone it, but we were just our mindset was that we had to do it, and that there was this threat." And we look back now and we look at the relations we have with the Vietnamese, Vietnam now, and the Vietnamese, and the commercial and relationships, and you just say, I wonder if there was another way. But I think we were just so caught up in their. We thought, what are we doing with China? What are we doing in Russia? And yet, a few years later, when Nixon and Kissinger went to China, and they understood that there was not a monolith. I'm just wondering if maybe there could have been something different. But I think it was a hand we had, and we played it out. Yeah, and in terms of my role, I'm thinking that it was, no, it was not a terrible experience for me. So I'm thinking that it was important to do. I think it was given the situation, it was important to do.
Did you ever feel that the American public was less enthusiastic about those who served in Vietnam?
Not directly. Just by way, I was in the ROTC unit at San Francisco State. And this is the time of what was going on at Berkeley. But it was sort of, and I was with a lot of people, and there were very active discussions, arguments about Vietnam, but never in a, I never, and it wasn't, at that time we still wore a uniform once a week, and there was never any, never anything direct, so I didn't. And I remember a guy, about 2 years after I was back, and I was talking to a guy, actually he was my car had broken down and it was towed, and he was a mechanic, and he was a Army. And we were talking about it, and he was saying, what kind of question? And what I told him is, I really didn't expect anything. Yeah,
Do you think that Vietnam veterans were discriminated against when they returned to the United States after their tours in Vietnam?
I know some were. And you look at the number of Vietnam veterans who are homeless. There are, in fact, I work with a fellow, and he still has nightmares. And what strikes me is that all the men and women are coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq now, and I think the country, we ask a lot, and we're not willing to pay, and we're going to shortchange them, I'm afraid. It just really, we just want it on the cheap.
Why do you think the Vietnam War Memorial Wall has such a profound effect on people, even those without any connection to the wall?
Well, the effect it has on me is the fact is that there are no statues and no heroic pictures or and of the names, and so you look and when you come face to face with the fact that it personalizes it in a way, even if you don't know anyone, and then if you do know someone, and you go there and you find them there. I think it's because it personalizes in a way that's never been done before.
It's a list of uncompleted lives.
Yeah, and you start here, and then visually, you start here and you look, and then it gets, and so I just think in high school, a guy I went to high school with, he was in the 173rd.
173rd Air Assault.
Yeah, and he was killed in '65, June, and while I was at summer camp and never found his body. So I think of him a lot.
Is there anything else you would especially like to share about your Vietnam War experience?
I get, I was really fortunate. It's not, and the people who went through, people who are prisoners of war, or the people who, I think as a country we need to understand what we ask people to do, and we need to step up and take care of them and give them what they need. And I don't think we are. I don't think we are, but talk about it.
Thank you for your service,
Paul?
and thank you for participating in this program.